defa moderatör olarak bu
Well, I am generally the speaker of this panels, but I'm the moderator for the first time. Well, actually, we have specialists in our panels. Actually, we have two general managers in our panels, actually. And actually, I think we have the highest rate of women speakers in our panel, and I think it's a success. Before the panel, actually, I talked with the panelists, and if you are aware, I think we are in a new era in terms of Turkish Wind Energy Association, because this is the 10th year of our Congress, and we say that wind energy is a national matter. So, I would be giving some questions to the panelists during their presentations. Well, as you all know, the figures are very important. We have over 180 projects, and with all of the stakeholders, this is our performance. But as you all know, in each project, we have over 4 and 5 different consultants, and actually, we have over 100 megawatts of experience. So I think this is a success thanks to the contributions of the consultants, and I think it's a very important stage for the public sector too. So let's start with Suat. And let's talk about this 10-year period. Although they are limited in number, we have non-licensed wind projects. Although delayed, we have some offshore projects. We have some consultancy support. So what are your comments on that? Thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Well, the wind energy project and wind energy in Turkey, I think it's underrated. In Turkey, there are lots of good projects, but they are not realized. I think this is the industry situation, and I think as consultant with the environmental impact assessment and mapping that we give consultancy services to, in the last 10 years, there have been some major changes, especially in terms of our reports, because there are some additional reports integrated, and there are some more inclusive reports, and I think it lead the way to more successful projects. But when we look at the last 10 years, in Turkey, as you mentioned, offshore and other YEKA projects, other wind power plant projects, actually, we have actually lots of projects to be done. As consultants, I think especially in terms of the public sector, sometimes they misevaluate our project because the public sector sees that and they thinks that wind power plant projects are bad. And I think the more we have our wind power plants in Turkey, the more it will be better. But there are some factors limiting this. Actually, during these 10 years, we have been exposed as consultants and as investors. It was a challenge for us. For example, when we look at the last 10 years, actually, I saw a news in the newspaper. President says that we have the installation power of 7,500 megawatts, but it was only 19 in the beginning. So I think with the right effort, I think we will have better projects. Well, that's all from me. Thank you, Suat, for your contributions. I have the same question for Ebru. Well, actually, you have been in this industry for more than 10 years. You have been in the sector in the beginning. And actually, you have some data to share about Turkish Wind Energy Association. What are your comments about the projects that we have conducted, and what about the services? Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Ebru Arıcı. I'm the owner and the general manager of RES Energy since 2005. With the environmental impact assessment, mapping, the permits and developmental process, I am dealing with all of the processes, and I think in total, in the licensing process, we have over 6,000 projects. And actually, in this 10-year period, 115 project means that we have lots of regulations and legislations. This is the diagram. What is the procedure in an investment phase? There are some boxes and there are some circles. I think Suat knows this very well. When we see a diagram like this, a consultancy becomes vital. And in this scope, we need to have a coordination. And actually, if there are limitations, we need to predict them beforehand. We need a good management. And actually, management has different aspects. For example, we have an investor aspect, and we also have the consultancy phase. And actually, they need to have a competency documents, and that's why the non-licensed ones, you only have the property, and the actually other phases are still the same. But in the YECA auctions, offshore has more responsibilities. In total, this is the diagram that we have. So the right consultancy, and if there is a coordination in the consultancy phase, then we will realize more projects. Thank you. Well, actually, one of the speakers who is dealing with the beginning phase of the investments, we have another panelist, Christian Johannes.
Since 1996 and busy in the wind energy sector, and I'm the general manager of Reconsult, my own company, since 2005. So to answer your questions, Reconsult, we are not active in the unlicensed market, so I cannot comment anything on that. Offshore is way too young in Turkey to be called a consultancy market. We have looked in detail into offshore in Turkey, and we have pre-selected a variety of potential project sites, simulated the energy yields, and found the capacity factors to be around 40%. That's way too low to make this, to justify an offshore investment. You can get that already onshore. So we advise our clients not to go into offshore activities. Regarding YECA, the key to successful YECA engagements are large and fully measured and risk minimized project sites, which you can take out of the drawer and apply for a tender. None of the past wind YECA winners, in my idea, had such sites ready, and a YECA site has to be huge. The past YECDAM sites, they mainly focus on projects around 30 or 50 megawatts, and in my idea you cannot use a 50 megawatt project site with one mast on it and then extrapolate it to 400 megawatts and then bid in the tender. That's way too risky, and the penalties for non-performance are just too high. Last but not least, YECDAM, there has always been and still is a need for consultancy in the licensed YECDAM market. In 2016, the average capacity factor of all wind farms in Turkey was 32%. In my idea, you need 35% in order to justify an investment. So we as Reconsult understand that more than half of the wind farms in Turkey do underperform, unfortunately. And the main reasons are there's either not enough wind at site, or it's been the wrong turbine selection, or you have operational problems whatsoever. There are a variety of wind farms operating next to each other in Turkey. We can see this, and when you compare their performance, you see one and two are really good, and the one in the middle doesn't deliver what you want to see.
Thank you very much for. Şimdi panelist olarak.
Now let's move on to the Bilgehan as a consultant. Actually, he is in another dimension in the wind sector, and actually in the recent years he has switched to the insurance department, and he has given some consultancy in terms of insurance. What are your comments? Thank you. My name is Bilgehan. Since 17 years, I have been in the energy sector, and last years were reserved to the wind sector. And actually, we were dealing with the equipment supply, but we are in another dimension now in the recent years. It's a very interesting actually department, and we have consultancy about the investment risks. And since we came from energy industry, in the decision phase, we know the risks that can face. And to make a decision of investment, there are lots of phases involved. We have technical phases, credit phases, analysis phases, and actually we have lots of stakeholders in the industry. And most of the stakeholders has a service. And in terms of risk assessment, firstly, we think about the whole project. We see the design risks, and we look for the risk that can be included during the construction phase, and actually at the top of it we have two elements. One is the market risk, and the second one is about the financial ones, the volatility in prices. And with the YECDAM, I think it can be eliminated by 10 years. But after YECDAM, actually the investor is faced with the risk. And actually we have a risk in our country, and we have some political risks, for example. I think these are all included in the insurance sector. And actually insurance policies, with the help of some instruments, are trying to save the investor. And like an investor, with the right consultancy, they evaluate all of the aspects of the project. As Kuzey Insurance, since the beginning of the decision and until the operation period, we actually save all of the risks. And globally, we also risk in terms of the climate. Season to season, it changes, as you all know. If there is no wind, with the help of some insurance equipment, we can also have an insurance in terms of climate too. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is the last speaker of the first tour, Fatma. Whether we are in wind sector or not, one of the indispensable consultancy aspect is that the NVGL, the country manager of the NVGL, Fatma, what are your comments? I'm Fatma Murray. I'm the country manager of the NVGL. Well, I have been here in Turkey for a shorter time when compared to Christian, and we were included in most of the phases of wind energy, WVP, and we have also licensed, non-licensed offshore YECA project. And if there is a question, why is consultancy important in all of this project? The aim of the consultancy starts with the beginning of the decision, and for further improvement of the project, we try to provide an optimum level, an optimum service for the stakeholder. And another aim is to have the same level of investment. And actually, we shouldn't divide the projects into small or bigger ones. I think all consultancy services are important. On the other hand, there are some firms that give an independent consultancy services, and in their scope they have different experts and different kinds of experience. And actually, in terms of human resources and financing, they are unique in their kind, because stakeholder can have the opportunity to use that information. Well, I would like to give some examples. Well, for example, in some project, actually, when giving some technical consultancy, we have low prices. But during that technical evaluation, we have seen that in the operational area, the transformers are about to finish their life expectancy, but they will be operational by many years. But we see that it's planted from another area, and for the dealer and the trader for their contract, I think there might be some drops in the price. When compared with the consultancy services, I think it's a very explicit example. And at the same time, for the financiers to evaluate the risks better and to have a clear prediction of the risk and minimizing the risks, and for the credit actually consultancy, our services are very important. And in a general view, in the developed sectors, what are the prices for consultants? For example, in total, 1/3 of the total budget of the project. But when we look at the benefits in terms of costs, we can see that it's highly important. Thank you.
İkinci
Thank you, and we will start the second round with you again. Let's have a deeper thinking on that question. As you know, while taking 7,600 megawatts into action, we worked together during that decade. And it's not just our country, but the world has changed in terms of finance technologies, megawatt sizes, the tower sizes, and the connection types, hybrids. There was no storage option, but now we do have it. So with lots of changes in action, are there any changes in the demands of your customers, and also are there any changes in your services? How do you meet the expectations in terms of changing circumstances? When we compare a decade ago, wind energy was a new sector. The know-how and the experience were in a low level, and the measurements were made through 30-meter towers. However, now we know that if it is a bankable energy finance, there are certain conditions. What is ambiguity? Or what are the specific points to check in a project? Sure, the learning curve in this sector has a pattern, and in majority of standards now we are in a good position. However, that impedance still continues, and there are certain difficulties, and the demands from the customers have changed. We do think that the consultant's main point is to give a lead on technologies as well. So the consultant should have experience and refresh the technology, software, and the methodologies regularly, and they need to evaluate sector and the market regularly, and it is their responsibility to lead their customers in accordance with that. We do see the changes in Turkey year by year, surely, and the service that we provide varies in accordance with that. The current situation of the project, the maturity of the sector, and in different fields now we do provide services as well. We have a customer-oriented, custom-made solutions. Those are the positive improvements, surely, but when we check the other side, it is not always that positive. For example, 4 to 5 years ago, the foreign investments, foreign finances leaving the country, unfortunately, we had a certain distance to quality. There was a regression in terms of quality, and the time limitations were quite rigid, and we feel the pressure as the consultants as well. And you have to provide your services at the highest level of quality. For a global consultant, it is a difficult, challenging atmosphere to work in. You have to do what you have to do, but you have time limits. I may say that in our portfolio, maybe the profile has changed a bit. We continue to work with banks and big investors, but we would like to have quality as a priority in order to realize those projects in a healthy manner. Bilgehan, the wind volatility insurance that you have stated, and also the customer's insurance demands, when you take those into consideration, what would you like to add? Now, our investors are quite knowledgeable, and they have enough experience. The electricity sales fees at the market, and also operation of the plants, they have that experience. Everyone in the market, I do believe, have knowledge over the worldwide knowledge. They really like the market, and everyone is quite willing to take part in this sector. And investors meticulously go into details for the projects. And right now, the customers, the investors, read the maintenance agreements in the project preparation phase. And how do they cover that maintenance process with their insurance agreements? And with that, the insurance market, when there is a damage, how there could be a compensation for that damage, and the exemption levels also have changed. Now the turbine maintenance levels or service maintenance agreements, those topics were neglected somehow in the past, but now they do pay attention when there are thunders at the wind power plants. Then they try to figure out solutions. So the insurance sector has evolved accordingly. Now, investors do not have the luxury to lose money. And they do need different instruments for that. For a derivative, wind volatility insurance is one of them. It is getting popular. This is a parametric insurance method. Wind energy investor. Let's assume that the wind levels decrease that year as for the futures of the season. Now, together with that insurance, there could be compensation. And for the analysis and technical consultancy, it is a complicated issue. Kuzey Insurance and Reinsurance Brokerage. We are giving services under this name, and we do evaluate the fields technically, and we examine if that insurance is applicable for that field or not. And the planned investment risks, what are those? The building process, the montage and assembly, and also for the operation duration risks also occurs. Those are the weather conditions and plant performance. And apart from those, we have political and bureaucratic risks. And there are certain primes of insurance to give compensation to the customer, but also in the field. In 2014, in average, wind speed decreased 24% nearly, and it was unexpected, so it caused a chaos for the reimbursements of the investors. And that change of 24% in the wind speed caused a 3 times higher effect on energy loss. 24% capacity factor field, when there is such a decrease, when you calculate it $100 per megawatt hour, then you have a huge number. So in the world, when there's a decrease in wind levels, lots of offshore and onshore large plants have revenue losses. And if you're quoted to the capital market, it will affect also your company's value in the stock exchange. And it also affects your pocket money, surely. It's not just a stock exchange, but the consultants know this map quite good. This is the seasonal decrease in wind anomaly map. In 2014, you may see 30%, 20% across the country. The wind speed decrease, and that cause revenue losses. And how does this instrument work? The reports, bankable reports prepared by our consultants are examined by the insurance experts, and they have a threshold value. If there is a score under that threshold value, this is P75, P50, P90, P99 values, which ensure the delta in that manner are evaluated. And if you have that lower level than threshold, then you evaluate P90 as P99. And that energy generation in P90 is higher, but the productivity is lower, so you continue your production as it is P75. This is a €1 billion value company's product instrument. For example, Civis insurance companies also use it, and we have presented to the Turkish market. Banks are quite interested with this instrument because the risk, the last risk belongs to the one who made the investment, and there is such a turnover, and if you use this insurance, then it could be a good solution. I will skip those points fast in order not to interrupt others' speech. So if you increase the level to P9 to 99 or 84, there is debt service coverage ratio, DSCR, in financement engineering. This means that you may use much credits, bank credits, because in the field there is a support for increased energy generation level. And there are some figures. If you're interested, I may talk to you outside during the coffee break. And through that, P50, 84, 90, and 99 values are given here, and this is the threshold value. This area, if there is a level under that, then they get the compensation for it. The best part of it is that insurance experts evaluate the consultant's report. For example, you are the investor, but you go to a consultant, then the consultant company gives you, for example, P75 level, but with that report, it could be increased to P90. This is a derivative. Rather than an insurance instrument. In the United States, there are huge wind plant powers using this instrument as an insurance. Thank you very much. Sure, this innovative instrument used in our market is a good thing, but the investors should pay attention to that. With global climate change, do we expect higher levels of wind or abnormal levels of wind? We will experience that in the future. Christian?
And your
Fatma gave a very good summary about this, so I don't need to repeat this. The only thing is, obviously, the investment models changed in Turkey. We had YEKDEM for a long time, and now we have YEKA, so also a consultant has to adjust to these changes, and if we ever will get offshore, there's even more adjustment necessary. But over the last 10 years, not much really has changed except the new coming up YEKA.
Ebru Hanım, size geldiğimizde
Ebru, when it comes to you, the permissions name haven't changed a lot, but the content has changed. The methods, the way to follow, the costs have changed, and what kind of requirements are coming from your customers, and what are the innovative new solutions for your customers? When you check topic by topic for that those changes, in 2007, when the plans tried to get the most investment, the forest law 17th and 18th articles were stopped, not in practice, so the permissions waited for a long time. In 2013, license legislation has changed, and the Ministry of Finance transferred their powers to immovables directorate, so they have regulated it. Though those seems like minor changes, even the minor change cause an 8 to 9 month of wait. And we have tried to transfer our experience in that. And since 2013, at least 14 amendments were made to the protocol. And this protocol in between TWEC and Turkish Armed Forces, it takes again 9 months to evaluate the process, but thankfully now we cover that period in 4 months nearly now. And again, another legislation had amendments for 30 times. Again, in 2014, forestry law had another amendment. We have waited for the tender process. All those projects were affected in that, from that procedure. And 30 projects were cancelled because of those circumstances. Then again, 10th of July 2018, we are hearing about those forestry issues. Forestry Ministry and Agriculture Ministry have merged, and now there are changes in the legislations. The general elections unfortunately affect the whole procedure. Since 2010, we had 2 referendums for general elections, 2 local elections, and also presidential elections. And we have survived through a struggle. This requires a flexibility. If there is an affected area in your project, then you may just put it into parts to deal with. And when we check the previous table, I have started with the structuring and permission part of the projects, but you need to have one organization to organize everything. In one hand, you need to control the things. So in our office, we organized ourselves accordingly for those investments. And at this point, by taking all those into consideration, while designing a project as much as possible, there could be problems, surely, but in order to minimize the problems, you need to lay out the general picture in the beginning. And in the second phase, of course, the procedures that you have is the turbine production to financement to the insurance. Maybe for the investment 10 years ago, we were talking about certain figures, but now the financement will start after the permission completions. The building part of it and the circulation completion affect every part of the project. And last year, at least, we are at a point to foresee the process clearly. Our office is above 35 people, and majority of them are women. And we are getting better and stronger. And that environmental protection regulations, the modernization of those regulations, etc. And in terms of total effect, the installed plants and the capacity of them, the numbers of them increase through the time, and also the effects on nature increase. And most probably the demands have changed accordingly. What do you think? 10 to 15 years ago, that environmental reports were not that detailed, but back in time, to have the plant in power was not didn't take that long. Ebru summarized majority of the things that I was talking, but now they are struggling to get permissions. Rather than checking the feasibility of it, etc. I do know of investors who are here, but they try to get the forest permission, for example, or other permissions. In terms of environmental report, what are the differences? Again, in the past, it was a very simple report to get the approval, but now even it is detailed, when there is a court process, the approval, the permission could be cancelled. The bird lovers now are ornithologists, and now people are going extreme. But as I have stated in the beginning, now we have very qualified and quite detailed reports by getting academic supports and the professional consultants. Even the consultants get consultation over their reports, because now the public bodies and the commission member engineers on those public bodies are quite aware of the issues on wind energy, and there are really good projects. As I would like to state that I do agree with Ebru. The intensity of the investor is the focus of investor is not to have the investment, but to get the permission. So to have a wind plant power plant into action requires 2 times higher effort for the investors. In the context of our Congress, there were sessions yesterday, international environmental impact assessment reports were in focus of the global investors, but now national ones do also pay attention to it. Either they have a national investor or international global investor. And they would like to have higher quality in that, but it requires a longer time period. So as project developers and public bodies, we need to take those megawatts projects into action, and the time pressure versus cost pressure, we are doing our best in that manner.
Çok değerli.
Well, while preparing for this panel, except for our consultants that we have different type of consultants. We have over 15 topics, 15 different subgroups of consultancy during wind energy. We have evaluation, assessment, consultancy, licensing ones, EIA consultants, and construction consultants that we have, and we have insurance consultants, optimization consultancy, and financing ones. And as Ebru stated, like in the licensing process, they are integrated into each other. So the next question appears. Well, consultants, if they are working together as an integrated part, I mean, how it reflects to your experience. What are we standing to today? And actually, I had 2 years of consultancy, so I have a question. Sometimes their opinions are not matched. So, what are your opinions? Uh, let's start with you, Suat. Well, actually, as consultants, as our firm, if we are not that competent to be included in some consultancy, we have some services of other consultant firms. As you mentioned, we come together with the banks or other industry people. That's how we can be more successful. We look for more details, especially for the bankable reports, not just for international finance firms. It also actually relates to Turkish banks too. For example, the energy engineers, environmental engineers can be included. There are some conflicts in terms of opinion, especially we come across it while working with the international finance firms, because actually they think of our reports like other countries, but it's not the case. In Turkey, there are some conflicts in terms of licensing process, and actually by having discussions, we generally have a consensus. And as a consultant, actually between the finance industry, for actually solving our conflicts, we have other institutions, finance institutions, that helping us to solve. And there were some good finance institutions that understood our aspect, understood our opinions in terms of Turkey. Ebru, what are your solutions? As you stated earlier, are we have some additional consultancy, as you said, but in general, when you think of all of your customers, what is it like to be integrated? Well, why you don't do energy analysis? This is the most common question that we are faced to. Well, this is a whole another subject. And actually, this is not just a result. The result depends on a very high experience level. We said that we wouldn't do it, but with the energy analyst firms, we start it at the beginning. And until the beginning, we worked with these firms in terms of energy analysis. We don't do it, but we try to be the best in our scope. This was our approach, and with the analysis firms, we work in a very coordinated way, and I think it affects the whole projects in such a good way. And another aspect is finance. You need to get together with the finance institutions, because there might be two different ways, because there are costs from the licensing process, the costs from the construction. So to evaluate it at the beginning of the project is essential. We get together with the firm that will do the construction, the analysis firms and banks. We come together at the beginning. And actually, the other side wants the finance institution to be included. And I think this is the profile of the investment.
Modified slightly is how is your experience? What is your experience about consultants working together and consultants working at other sides of the table?
Well, I think development of a wind farm is something you cannot do just alone as one consultancy company. There are many. There's a need for a lot of input. I mean, we use consultants. We are a consultant, but we use sub-consultants in order to satisfy the client. And you have to do that because it's just too expensive for one consultancy company to have the human resources to cover all needs of a wind farm from start to operation. It's just impossible. So consultants are necessary. They have the necessary experience over years and years. But a good consultant should be able to manage the entire process of project development. So yeah, we use sub-consultants as well, and only like that we can guarantee that our client gets a doable project and gets his finance.
Bilge Hanım bu soruya
Bilge, what is your comment? I think your comment might be different from the others. That's what I hope, because actually not as an opposite table, but actually you are at a different location of the table. So what are your comments? Well, in terms of turbine supply, for example, in the investment process, you have 12 different types of consultancy. They are all important, but in my opinion, my recommendation is that when you are doing WVP, you need a geotechnical report. And the second one is that you need to have a good measurement data and you need to have a micrositing report. We all know that, but the most challenging part is the licensing process. In Turkey, we have a very challenging licensing process in terms of investors. And actually, we need to be meticulous in terms of analysis. And for the last 5 years, I think we raised an awareness in the investors. But actually, in the beginning of the 2000s, when we look at the power plants, we see the damage on the power plants, and actually the losses are related to the worse micrositing reports. And actually we didn't have good geotechnical analysis, and that's why we have cracks on their base. And to rehabilitate it, there are lots of expenses, and I think this shows how important planning is at the beginning. And I think none of these aspects should be neglected. And at last, an investor, a plant investor, or shouldn't be faced to a damage, a revenue loss because of an engineering mistake. And I think there are some insurance, and it's called professional indemnity. We have these kind of insurance types, and all of the consultancy agencies and all of the engineering design firms should have these insurances. And while choosing a consultant, investors look for these insurances. Thank you. Fatma, in terms of the NVGL, we know that you have different types of consultancy services. So what are your comments? Maybe you can have your inner experiences, or maybe you have other experiences from different firms. Well, I see consultants like this. In our industry, we are one of the stakeholders, like the financiers, investors, turbine suppliers. They are the stakeholders, and I think consultants are also stakeholders. And our ultimate aim is to have a sustainable, healthy environment. And actually, we need to work efficiently in this environment. So that's consultants give services from A to Z. But when we look at the happenings in Turkey, we can have some partnerships with the subcontractors, because our main aim is that until the beginning to the end, we need to have a further improvement. And as our colleagues mentioned, the smallest mistakes can cause very huge impacts, damages on the power plants. So while choosing the consultants and partners, we need to be cautious about some aspects. We need to look for the experience of the consultant. We need to look for their references. And actually, we should check the capacity of the insurances, and all of these are vital. And if consultants work together, and if these consultants are has a high quality, I think investors would choose it, and I think consulting agencies would also choose it this way. Well, let's give example from developed market. There are some consultants in the investor side. We have some consultants in the finance side. They are rechecked all the time. There are some negotiations, and actually, we have some bulletproofs in the end. This is our aim, and I think getting into this point might require a few years, but I think in the last 10 years we don't do project financing, and actually we do institutional financing. We are still doing it, and actually it is focusing on the size of the firm and looking of the debt of the firm, for example, if they can pay it or not, and that's they are looking. And I think that's why we cannot reach the level of the developed markets. But in terms of our perspective, markets should be evolved to this stage, and we need to have high quality in terms of consultancy. We need to have a dynamic staff. We all need that in our wind energy sector, and I think we are ready to work with them at all times. Thank you.
Kalan vakti iyi değerlendirmek için
In order to evaluate the time efficiently, I will ask a question to general, and then we may have questions from our participants. As we have discussed, wind energy is already regulated highly, and as you have stated, consultants should have quality productions to contribute to the project. But for that, do you think there should be certain standards, certain regulations for the consultants to have the expected high quality products, or a tailor-made, a flexible working field is better for the consultants, so there is no need for standards or regulations? What do you think? I do believe in this sector, if you do not have competency, you can't work. I think competency should be sought in every energy project, in every investment, and in every consultancy stage. The best should perform. And I may state, flexibility, leaving us flexible is not the issue, but the investors should act much flexible in order not to have stops in the investment. And in order to clarify the road for the project, I think the flexibility should be in this field. And yes, competency should be sought, as I've stated, and when you have that competency, you can't act flexible because you do have certain rules to act in line with. I think flexibility should be given to the investors. Suat is right, because we have certain certifications for the services that we provide. There are, I think, it should be regulated in the institution. For example, yes, Ministry of Environment approves the field certificates, and they need to have experts in their institution, because there are certain parameters we do perform in the same field, so we do know what we do, and in exchange the permission giver institution should have those expertise level in that public body. For example, if they do see that permission certificate for the first time, yes, that expert will have difficulty. That's no surprise. In order to eliminate that timidity of the expert and also the challenges in the process, I think there should be requirements for those experts, and it will relax the hands of the investor and also the project. And maybe at that point, I can give you a comment from the side of technical consultants. There should be certain standards, surely, and the consultant should take responsibility for for his or her work, because even a minor error could cause a huge damage and loss. That's why consultants should be credible and should have references and has competency, should has professional insurance as well, and they need to follow international standards as well in terms of technical consultancy. But on the other hand, for flexibility, yes, those could give us the standards, but at the same time the market demands shouldn't be neglected. You need to shape your services in accordance with the demands and give service accordingly. And yes, we need to be flexible if we want to survive. You may be at the age of 155, but if you want to go ahead for another 155 years, then you need to meet the expectancy of the market.
Wind farm development, there is no real standard. There is no international standard. There is only a standard for the wind measurements. That's all. In the ISC, the ISC is working on a standard on how to do a micrositing, a site assessment. But this will not come out before 2025 anyway. So. There is no international standard for how to get planning permission or how to do the land securing, because this is changing from country by country. And within Turkey, as Ebru rightly stated, this changes every half an hour. So there is no standard possible for that.
Ben başka bir boyut açmak istiyorum yine.
And I would like to give opinion from the side of insurance. Fatma has stated, I will give you a concrete example. One of the most critical structure is the basis of the wind turbines, and yes, there could be, there are simple designs, and they pay, for example, 30,000 euros for that design, and they build the plant on it. But if there is an error, that 30,000 euro causes 3 million euro loss. And who will compensate that loss? And who is responsible from that error, from that loss? There is a design engineer who had a project in exchange of 30,000 euro. There is a very simple minor mistake maybe, and the whole turbine is now out of use. So the ones who have agreements know that they are responsible in exchange of their payment. So this is a paradox of investment. To whom you will charge this loss? Professional responsibility, professional indemnity. if the investor asks for that from the engineering company, for example, it is not just 30,000 euro, but they may charge them with 3 million euros because they have insurance policy for that. And now the investors should demand this, especially certain organizations, big ones, now seek for that, and we need to question this field. I do believe investors shouldn't take major risks and pay attention to that point. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists because you have contributed with your experiences and opinions. Do we have any questions to one of or all of the panelists? I do not see any question. I believe we have clearly stated, or everyone just knows the issues quite clearly. I would like to thank to our panelists. That's magnificent five that contributed to this session. You can just design and create any wind power plant in any part of the world because they are great, and we have invisible heroes of our projects, design engineers. For that 7,600 megawatts in use in Turkey, we would like to thank them. And next year in Izmir we will have TWEC Congress, so see you there.